The whole goal of product market validation and back to being, uncomfortable or embarrassed about your first product is the reason you put it out there. And the reason that you're uncomfortable is because you're trying to validate, right? You're trying to get validation that, am I actually solving a problem for this particular user?
Right. Am I the only one that thinks this is a problem, or just like thousands of people think this is a problem?
Exactly. And is it like the mom, don't go to your mom and give it to her, right? Because she's going to tell you every one of your ideas is good, right? So,
honey, it's great.
Yeah, exactly.
Good job, honey. Welcome to Find Your Freedom, the best entrepreneurship podcast. Real quick, I have two things for you. First off, are you an aspiring entrepreneur that wants to find your own freedom? Or are you just unfulfilled or unhappy in your current job and you crave more? Our goal at FYF is to build a community uniting successful entrepreneurs with aspiring entrepreneurs and provide the best resources possible to support you on your entrepreneurial journey. Check out our free entrepreneurship ebook and all of the resources you need to find your own freedom at findyourfreedompod.com. Secondly, one of the best ways for podcasts to grow is to share episodes with your friends and family. It would mean the world to Doug and I if you would listen on your favorite audio platform, watch, and subscribe on YouTube. We just finished recording a killer episode with Ravi Kurani. Ravi's story of starting a water testing company in India for the government, then pivoting to selling pool testing equipment direct to consumers in the US, and blowing up and selling the company 5 years later is so incredible. He discusses entrepreneurial grit, the Pareto principle, being a good listener not only to his customers, but to his team and to his investors. This episode has some incredible advice and is super inspiring. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share your favorite episode with your friends. Yo. Welcome, Ravi. Super excited to have you on with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Ravi, welcome to the Find Your Freedom podcast, my man. Now, you've been called a lot of things in your illustrious career, a visionary, an innovative thinker. You're a TedX speaker, and I believe I read that you had made the Forbes 30 under 30 list. All very, very impressive things. What would you say is your most
baller? What
would you say is your most proudest achievement so far in your career?
My gosh, I would say just getting to like today, right? Honestly, like the fact that I'm still here. We're still churning along. The company is doing well. The awards and accolades are just, at that time and place for awards that me and the team have done, right? I think like if I was to say what's my greatest achievement, it's waking up today. That's honestly what I would say.
So kind of just staying in the game, playing the infinite game, and hopefully having the longevity I think we're all striving towards. Now, I love hearing about origin stories. I think everyone kind of finds it interesting to hear about the humble beginnings. Can you tell us about the moment or the time period that you made the decision to first go out on your own and become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think it started off at like a really early age. My dad was an entrepreneur. My family is, entrepreneurial. They came here from India, grew up in the deserts of California, right near Coachella, Palm Springs, and just kind of watching my dad run a chain of pool and spa supply stores, I think was like my first foray at entrepreneurship, right? Obviously, you're not necessarily working or building your own thing, but just kind of seeing that really gave me the kind of impetus to kind of figure out how to actually strategically think about entrepreneurship. When I can like really think about actually when I did jump into entrepreneurship, it was around high school. My first venture was actually starting a ping pong club in high school. That was kind of a
ping pong.
that was the first thing.
That's pretty cool. Ping pong club. What I did hear there early in your response was about the family business. So you said that was a pool and spa business?
Yeah, that's correct. It was a pool and spa store.
That kind of brings you to what you do currently in your current business at Sutro. Can you quickly or briefly just explain what the company does and what has set the company apart from its competitors in the marketplace?
Yeah, for sure. So the company Sutro, we basically make a robotics device that remotely measures water chemistry, right? It's a floating laboratory is like what I like to call it. It measures water parameters, pH, chlorine, alkalinity, nitrates, phosphates, right? I won't go into all the chemistry, but each of those specific parameters, depending on how you use water, will better tell you what you need to do to treat it, right? So if you're growing grapes for wine, you need a particular amount of nitrates or phosphates from your fertilizer and the water to make sure that those grapes grow the way that they should so you can make wine. Sutro measures those parameters so we can better actually treat your water. We initially started the company actually back in India when I was an associate at a small venture capital fund. A lot of the deals that we saw were around water filtration, but nobody was doing this water sensing. Tried selling to the Indian government. Stupidest thing a startup can do. Don't try to sell to a government. And so kind of to your point, Doug, we ended up coming back to the US and flipping the business model around. Like you said, my dad had a chain of pool and spa supply stores. And I'm like, hey, we have a sensor. I remember doing pool tests, water tests at my dad's pool and spa store. What if I made this floating laboratory and deployed them in swimming pools and hot tubs? With the longer tail model of eventually going to the agriculture, going to the food and beverage, going to the drinking water, with kind of where we initially started at from our initial Indian concept.
That's so cool. I think a lot of our audience, when they hear you talk about, I'm just going to create a sensor that is like a floating laboratory. Can you talk about the beginning iteration process of how you as an entrepreneur put together the first model of this, and then how it's the different iterations moving forward, how it's progressed? I think that first, a lot of people have this idea and they're like, how am I ever going to create this product that's in my mind? Can you talk through that for our audience?
Yeah, it's you have to cut the fat always, right? That's kind of my mantra. We didn't. So what makes us different in the market, kind of to Doug's question initially, was we have a fully custom sensor. We've built everything from scratch. To your point, it didn't start that way, right? We initially looked at the product development process and we're like, how do we build this thing the quickest way possible, right? Let's take things off the shelf. Let's go to Home Depot. Let's go to Amazon.com. If there's something that's available, let's Frankenstein this thing together, right? Let's get a sensor that's off the market. Let's connect it to a Wi-Fi chip. Let's use an off-the-shelf server and then basically stand up an app, right? That's the quickest way of doing things. You don't want to build your own servers. Don't get your own racks, right? Don't sit here and try to relearn a programming language. Use ChatGPT to build half the code for you now, right? Like if I could have done that 10 years ago, I totally would have. And so back to this mantra of cut the fat, build things as the quickest way possible to solve a problem, right? And so that's kind of the second point here of understand what your customer, and then get the quickest way possible to actually get that executed. And then you can always go back and clear up the tech debt, right? Clear up all the issues that you had. But cut the fat. That would kind of be my initial answer to that question. And so tactically speaking about it, right? We literally went to Amazon. I literally bought 5 sensors off the market. There was actually an existing pool sensor that used to exist called the ePool, and we took their product off the shelf. I worked with their CEO, and we initially built a software layer. All we were doing was better communicating the data that was in the swimming pool and then giving the user information that we thought that they needed. That's kind of that's like the origin story of how we built the product.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's so valuable. I think that it's really important for people to hear that. I think that will be we have a quote from most of our guests that really just kind of resonates and that we kind of refer to later on in podcasts. And I think cutting through the fat, I think that's great, really powerful, simplify it, take some of the complications out and make it as simple as possible just so you can get your first iteration. And that kind of gets us back to one of my favorite quotes of entrepreneurship is, if you're not embarrassed of your first draft, then you waited too long. And I think that you really followed that exactly. Get it together, put it through, and let's see how it goes. So from that first piece, can you kind of give us a quick summary from that first draft of your product? How long did it take to really get to where you're like, wow, we have something going on here?
I think that the answer to that question is different at each stage, right? So the wow, we think we have something going on here question, we within 2 weeks actually answered that question, right? That's the whole goal of product market validation is, and back to being uncomfortable or embarrassed about your first product, is the reason you put it out there and the reason that you're uncomfortable is because you're trying to validate, right? You're trying to get validation that am I actually solving a problem for this particular user?
Right. Am I the only one that thinks this is a problem, or just like thousands of people think this is a problem?
Exactly. And is it like the mom, don't go to your mom and give it to her, right? Because she's going to tell you every one of your ideas is good, right? So
honey, it's great. It's the best.
Exactly.
Good job, honey.
That's why you need to go out, and that's why you need to be uncomfortable, right? That goes back to being ashamed. Is the goal is to get rejected or accepted one way or the other. And so if you're embarrassed, you're going to get rejected, and that's part of the process. So back to that kind of initial question of 2 weeks in, we got this thing to about 25 users or so. And, I think like 90% of them was like, dude, this is awesome. We totally need this product. And me working at the pool store, I was like, well, no, of course it's the problem. I know it's the problem. I have just now validated that it is a problem.
Right. Yeah. The market is now definitely affirming that this is scalable. And you think about, like, I'm sure initially you were like at your computer Googling, like, how many pools are there in America? Like, like how big is this thing? Multiply how many pools in America times, $15 or $50.
Yeah, exactly.
Look at what my market cap is going to be. I love this.
Yeah.
Cool. So now let's fast forward a little bit. So you grinded a little bit along. What would you say looking back, now that this was 2013, I think you said that you started out?
Yeah, 2013, yeah.
What was your biggest challenge? Like looking back, like, man, this was a moment or a specific problem. Like, man, that was my biggest challenge I had. And then can you kind of talk through how you resolved it and then how you look at it back at it now?
Yeah, I would say kind of twofold, right? The first is not being back to cutting the fat. I didn't cut the fat quick enough, right? So there was times where I look back where I sat in the building for way too long, right? I was kind of like in my own head with the team, whatever it is, designing, building, thinking like, oh, it's not perfect yet. The second part of what I think looking back that I wish I would have done is figured out people, right? I think in kind of a headline. And what I mean by that is people fund, people buy, and people work on your product. People are everywhere, right? And so your goal as a founder, your goal as an entrepreneur is to make sure you understand people, right? Are you building the right thing for the people that are going to buy your product? Do you have the right people that are building the product? Are you talking to the right people that are going to fund the product, fund the company? And so that's something that I didn't think about, right? Coming from an engineering background, working at my dad's pool store, I was always thinking about problem solution, product sales, but I didn't understand the underlying psychology of what drives this entire thing, which are at its base unit, back to first principles, is people.
Right.
And so those are the two things that I would say that looking back, I wish I would have understood more.
Yeah, that's a great response. Really thinking about the three important groups that you have to be working on as a founder. You have your customers is a group that you really need to concentrate on, and that's kind of over here. You have your team building it that you have to motivate and keep efficient and productive. And then you have, funds. You have to be able to pay the second group, right? So you have to have funding coming in. You have to manage that as vesting. It's a really important piece, I think, that really does a good job of showing and illustrating to the audience, really what an entrepreneur and a founder has to juggle, right? People think about these founders like they have these different groups, and I think it's good to put those into different categories, and then you can really better put your time towards each of the groups. And it shows the different skill sets that you need also. Where do you think your strongest skill set is on those? And then is there something that you decided you should start outsourcing, or is there things that you just decided to really improve yourself on?
Yeah, I think I think in general, founders should always kind of do every job first, right? I mean, obviously when you start getting into scale and you get to a larger company, you don't have the ability to do that. But early on, I always kind of thought that I needed to outsource things. My time is worth X, Y, Z. It is in reality, right? But you also need to learn how to speak the language to that person that you're going to hire, the organization you're going to hire, the contractor you're going to hire. Because if you have never logged into Facebook and seen the ad platform, right? I'm not even saying you need to understand it. I'm not saying you need to even put a bid down. But you probably need to know that there's a word called a bid. You probably need to know that, Facebook ads runs off of an RTB, a real-time bidding platform, right? Like, if you don't understand any of that stuff, how are you going to call in a contractor that generally can work with you to make sure that you optimize that, right? I'm not going to sit here and learn how to code Python. I coded in MATLAB for mechanical engineering, but like I should generally know what object-oriented programming is. I should know how like a relational database works so that I can then talk to the engineers to say, hey, look, here's the business logic of what we're trying to build. I may not know the specific line of code that you're going to write to actually solve that, but like generally, why don't you think about this from this intent? And that helps kind of drive the full stack of you just generally understanding what you're talking about so you can talk intelligently to these people. But at the same rate, connecting the dots between the people to the people, right? You want to connect your team to the customers, your investors to the product.
Right.
And so, yeah, that would kind of be my kind of answer to how I actually what I feel that I'm good at, right?
Yeah, that's awesome.
I'm kind of good at nothing, but I'm also sparsely good at everything.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Generalist and then a real expert in a couple really key things. I love that. If you could be speaking back to 20-year-old Ravi back to 2013, what are some of the things in those first few years that you would tell yourself that you think would resonate with our audience who are either in the trenches trying to start something out or they're planning like, how am I going to, so our audience is mostly built up of people that are like, I want to be an entrepreneur. I just out of college or I'm in college and I need to figure out how to do this, or people who are in their 9-to-5s and they're like, this just isn't for me. It's great for some people, but it just doesn't work for me. I really want to be my own boss. I want to have my own equity. What do you think you could tell yourself that would resonate with those people?
I would tell myself to understand the balance between being confident and listening. Right? That's like one thing that I really took for granted is you have to live in this dichotomy because you have to be confident enough to know that you're going out on a limb, right? You are. Like when you quit that comfy day job, you're getting a paycheck every 2 weeks. You're not going to get that. You may not get paychecks. You might get a lot of paychecks, right? Like you don't know which way this dice is going to roll, and that's kind of what you're doing is you're taking a risk. You are gambling. So there's a distinct level of confidence that you need. But at the same rate, if you're building something new, new can mean a consultancy, it can mean an innovative product, it can be a whole new invention. You have a spectrum. I'm not saying that every single person needs to be building an app all day long. Around listening, you need to make sure that you're listening to, again, those three groups, your customers, your employees, and your investors. And you need the confidence to make sure that you can also have thick skin to go out there and continuously keep getting thrown down to the ground again, right? Because that's going to happen naturally. It's part of the process.
Right.
So that would be what I would tell my 20-year-old self is, you need these two things. Figure out how to kind of work in the yin and yang between confidence and listening.
That's great. That's so awesome.
Wow. I love that. I love that point about striking the balance between having that confidence and then having the humility, I think, to listen, because I think most of us are a little too far to one side or too far to the other. So constantly calibrating and figuring out how to strike that balance is so important. And I don't know if I've ever heard it explained quite that way. So thank you for that. That was beautiful. Yeah. So Ravi, you're an investor. You wear a lot of hats: investor, advisor, board member, several companies. Seems like you're a guy that just gets a ton of shit done. And all of us have only 24 hours in the day. How do you avoid spreading yourself too thin with all these different things that you have going on? And can you share some of your time management secrets?
Yeah. So I would say it's a few things. The first is back to my mantra of cutting out the fat. You have to learn to say no, right?
Good.
And if I look back and I tell my 20-year-old self this, I'd be like, no, you're stupid, right? You have to say yes to everything, because the whole goal is to build redundancies to make sure that you're in all places at all times, right? Like, remember, Ravi, that's how you raise money. That's how you you were sitting there burning the midnight oil, being at networking events, sneaking into the Salesforce conference. Like, you can't say no, because if you say no, you're sleeping in bed and you're weak, right? You're not out there. Again, there's like a balance to that saying no. It's like making sure that you're running. For the audience out there, if you guys are not familiar, I would take a look at Pareto principle, right? Basically the 80-20 rule. There's 20% of the work that you do that usually results in like 80% of the output. So say no, that's not going to give you that 80%, right? Say no to the 80%. That's not the 20 that's going to give you that upswing. That's the first thing. The second one is, I would say, is delegating, right? Learning how to delegate. And this word delegation gets thrown around. It's not just going on Upwork and hiring a VA and throwing a bunch of work on them to like monitor your emails. Figure out what's important to you. Learn how to train the people around you so that they can do the work better than you, because you always want to hire up. And if you delegate to people that are going to do work better than you, you're actually, in a sense, getting exponential results from the people around you, because you're not piling all that work on your plate and you're learning how to quote unquote delegate, right? That's what I would define delegation as. The kind of third and fourth things would be get enough sleep. Like, I know people try to biohack and do all this like crazy stuff with like biohacking research out there. And hey, you can take that pill and this pill. And like, if you sleep, I don't know, I saw some crazy stuff back in 2013, 2014. You can take naps during the day and then you can like extend your time that you're awake. We have, millions of years of DNA knowledge like baked into this computer that is our brain. Sleeping and dreaming help you process information, right? And so like getting to bed and just getting those hours are the other side of you staying awake, right? Because the humans in theory run off of the dream state as well as being awake. And if you're taking that away, you're not allowing your brain to process that information you had during the day.
Interesting.
The fourth one, what I would say, is meditation. I've really gotten into meditation in the last year and a half. I do a combination of like breath work and then meditation. It's my time in the morning where I, from a sensory quote unquote deprivation standpoint, I take out all of the apps, I take out all the phone. You're like, it's just you and yourself for 30 minutes.
Wow.
And I've given myself that dream state at night, right? For my brain to process stuff. I've given myself a conscious state when I'm meditating for me to actively think about the stuff that I'm thinking about. And then I open the doors and I run into the day. Right. And so that kind of just gives me these like 3 steps to understand how my brain works in these 3 different phases to make sure that, I can actually process all this stuff throughout the day. But that's the 4 things I would say, Doug.
That's so interesting. So I do meditation also, and I've talked to some of my mentees about this and some other entrepreneurs about this. And what you said about it, I thought was really interesting. So I think what a lot of people struggle with when they hear meditation, they really think you immediately need to dive into like doing 30 minutes straight. Like, Robbie, did you start at 30 minutes straight, or was there kind of a workup of that? And then like, was there some things that you struggled with during that period?
Yeah, there definitely is a workup, right? As with kind of all things, if you go to the gym, you don't want to start lifting,
Right.
really heavy stuff. You're going to hurt
Yeah.
yourself. You won't know how to do it.
Right.
So what I always kind of tell people, and I know, so for the people out there, when you hear this, you're gonna immediately start shaking your head and you're gonna be like, that doesn't work for me. So just hear me out. The first thing you do is you sit in silence for like 5 minutes, right? And I know you're shaking your head and you're like, no, that's stupid. I'm gonna have a bunch of thoughts come through my head. The whole point of this is to allow your thoughts to flow. Right. And part of being part of that flow state is your mind's going through a defrag process, right? It's like you defragmenting your computer. It's going through all the files, it's cleaning them up. Your body knows how to do that. Your brain knows how to do that. It's been baked in from millions of years of evolution that you know how to do that. So let your brain do its thing, right? And then from 5 minutes, go ahead and you can start expanding that, to 20 minutes, 30 minutes. I sometimes do like these silence retreats where you actually like entirely take everything away. No Netflix, no phones, no reading, no books. You're just with yourself. And people are like, oh, I'd get bored with myself. Well, if you're going to get bored with yourself, how do you think the people around you are going to feel? Like, if you can't handle yourself, don't project yourself on other people, right? So that kind of goes back to being like the best version of yourself.
I think the disconnect is good.
Yeah. So that would kind of be my spectrum. I start with 5 minutes of silence and then go ahead and do it. I found that breath work is also good. There's a bunch of courses out there on breath work. It allows your brain to kind of focus on a thing, because sometimes people do just get distracted and start doing other stuff. It allows you to generally focus on a thing that you're supposed to do, and then you can that like ends up forming into meditation.
Yeah, that's what really helped me, because I would notice myself when I was doing my meditations that I would just be thinking about crypto or my kids or like what I wanted to be doing later. And I'd be like, oh, wait, I'm supposed to be meditating. And the breath work, the simple just thinking about the breathing, but even some like basic breath work has really helped me kind of just keep my mind more clear. And I feel like I'm getting more out of it. So I think that's a really good tip. Totally appreciate that.
Robbie, now reflecting back over the last decade, I read that you started Sutro back in 2013. So that would be 10 years at it, building this business and this company. And I think about halfway through that is when there was the strategic partnership / acquisition. So can you reflect back on what was the most formative experience for you in those first 5 years? And then what was the most formative for you in the last 5 years?
Yeah, that's a great question. The first 5 years, I would say the most kind of formative piece there was being lean, right? I mean, there was always this kind of like dread, right? I mean, as most founders have it, like you're not going to be able to make payroll if you have so
Right.
many months to live, but your timelines are always longer than they are, right? I think there's like a rule, like you can never, you're never going to be under budget. You're always going to be over. And the question
Right.
is like, how far does that dart go past the bullseye? And so I think, coming back to being lean, like just making sure you had that lean mindset of how do you cut the fat? Like let's like relook at this process again and cut the fat again and again. And it's like this continuous tuning across all parts of it, across the product, across customer development, across investors, right back to those three groups, making sure that you keep attributing that mantra of cutting the fat.
Was there a specific experience or moment that you remember, like, wow, this just blew me away and kind of changes the way that I think about how I do things?
Yeah, it's back to that like first example that I mentioned, right, of buying things off the shelf. We had like used that initial like off the shelf prototype that we bought, and then we kind of built that app layer. That was like the first rule of like cutting the fat. Like we didn't need to actually dig down and purchase our own sensor or like rebuild anything from scratch. I think a second experience was around like fundraising, right? Like everybody thinks that they like understand the fundraising process, but looking at it from multiple different angles, right? I found that the best way for me to fundraise was this process that I call kind of leapfrogging, right? So if you're a Series Seed startup, talk to founders that are in Series A, right? Because the Series A founders have already raised their seed. And so build that network of Series A founders, also build a network of Series Seed founders.
Right.
But more importantly, when you're talking to those Series A founders, if you get them to introduce you to their seed investors, sorry, there's no like real discrepancy or competition of you pitching against seed founders to seed investors.
Right.
And so again, cutting the fat, right? Like how do you get to the investors the quickest? But yeah, those are kind of two things that I would say from the first 5 years.
That's awesome. A common phrase that comes up a lot on this podcast is imposter syndrome. Is that something that you ever struggled with?
Oh my gosh, 100%, man. I don't, you never are going to be the best at what you're doing, right? In general, like if you just look at your interaction with the people around you, with everything you're doing, you're like, even if you win like the Nobel Prize in your particular field of study, there's going to be somebody that's going to win it the year after that's going to be better than you, right? So like imposter syndrome is
Right.
is a headline that exists everywhere. Like you will never be as good at your craft because there's always going to be somebody that's better, like very soon thereafter. And so I think the way to combat that is just to accept it, is to like know that I'm never going to be the best at what's going on here. Like from an imposter situation, this is the first time that I'm doing it. But the reality here is that I'm the first person that's doing it in this particular way because I'm me, right? I was given this life, I was given this upbringing, I am who I am living in this nation, in this place. And this is the idea that I have. And that's a different flavor than if Doug was to do it, right? His dad didn't have a pool store. And so he may come up with two very similar products, but his execution might be different. His origin story might be different, right? And that gives a different flavor to what you're going to do after than what you're doing today. And so
Awesome.
That would be my kind of point around imposter syndrome, is just like accept it and know that that's kind of what it is, but just deal with it.
Yeah, I love that. And embrace your originality instead of saying I'm not the best at. Yes, that's awesome. This is a question we ask every guest. How would you personally define entrepreneurship?
I would personally define entrepreneurship as solving a problem. And I want to unpack that a little bit, right? Because if you just make things for the sake of making them, that could be interesting, right? That's like innovation. That could be like ingenuity. That could be engineering. Entrepreneurship in general are people that design solutions for people and organizations that have problems. And so I think the first part about this, linking back to the initial first things we said at the beginning of the episode of be embarrassed about that first product, right, that you launch out there.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're solving a problem. You're embarrassed for a very reason of you don't think that your solution is good enough for the problem you're solving. And so I think, entrepreneurship is around solving problems.
That's awesome. That's really good. I like the simplicity, and that was a really good unpack. Was there one piece of advice that you look back on and was like, wow, that was the most impactful advice that I was given?
Yeah. I was actually reminded of this morning again, one piece of advice I was given is to actively listen, right? And people think that they're listening, they think that they're hearing. Do it a little more is what I would tell you, right? When you're sitting in that conversation, whether you're out for drinks with your friends, you're talking to your significant other, you're talking to the investors, listen a little bit more, right? Open up your ears. Don't try to craft your next message because you're not listening to what the person's saying across from you. And so that would be like one piece of advice that I still to this day I don't think I do enough, and I need to even more.
Yeah, we all need to strive to become better listeners, right? I think especially in podcasting, that goes a long way. So, so on the topic of traits and skills and abilities, what traits do you attribute to your success? What's the number one thing that Ravi brings to business that has been a big contributor to your success?
Yeah, I think I would say it's two things. The first would be around just like perseverance, right? Like and it's back to this kind of unattachment philosophy, right? Or just like embracement facility of imposter syndrome. Great, like just embrace it. This is what the reality is throwing at you. Great, just like walk on past it or figure out how to pivot around it. Which is kind of why I say like perseverance, or I guess people would define it as grit. It's the notion that you're just optimistic when you wake up every single day and you're like, the world is what the world is, and these are the things that I have to deal with. Let's just go ahead and march one foot after the next.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think the second thing would be around listening, right? Is making like I've really honed in those skills, and back to those three groups and back to people being people. You need to make sure your ears are open because that's who you're dealing with.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think grit and perseverance has been a pretty common one across most of our successful entrepreneurs that we've met with on the show here, because you got to have it.
Yeah, that's number one.
You got to have it. Yeah, absolutely. Now, there are a lot of people in our audience who are not happy, not fulfilled. They want to escape from the day job, corporate gig that they're in. What parting advice do you have for those folks that are listening?
If you have a problem, solve it, right? I've said that throughout the show. Like if your problem is you don't like your job, then go and solve it. Like go figure out how you're going to make that happen.
Yeah, especially we're actually going to do an emergency podcast with a couple of my friends that are in tech later this week to talk about AI and ChatGPT. Like if anything of our time in this world, like now is the time where there's the most opportunity, the most groundbreaking technology coming out, the most like ways that you can change the world. Like now is the time. So I totally, listen, try, and make sure you have the grit and perseverance to try on it. Cause like Ravi said, like that's probably the number one thing that I think people underestimate getting into entrepreneurship is like, it gets hard at a certain point. It gets really hard. And the people that don't have it to get through that barrier, sometimes people turn around and they didn't know that next big sale was right around the corner. And if you don't have the grit to do that, I love it. All right, Ravi, we're gonna finish here on this one. What is the best destination that you've ever traveled to?
Best destination. I would honestly say hands down would be Montenegro as of late. We were in the city of Budva. If I was to tell anybody to go visit a spot that's not really looked at from the tourism blogs, go check out Budva in Montenegro.
Wow,
very cool. Yeah, I think it's good for entrepreneurs to know that it's going to be really hard, and then there's cool places that you can go visit when you do make it. And there we go, we got another good one for the list.
Yeah,
Ravi, this is so fun. Your story is so unique and so exceptional, and we super appreciate you coming on today. Everyone has a different journey, but hearing yours, I think, really give our audience a real piece of understanding how you used, something from your childhood and your father's business to really solve a huge problem in the world, and now you see it all over the place. I actually have a friend that has one of your products, so super awesome. Thanks so much for coming on.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you guys for having me.
All right. If people want to reach out to you, learn more about you, where should we send them?
You can send them to my LinkedIn. I answer most DMs. And if not, you can email me at hello@mysutro.com. The customer service team will direct emails over to me.
Awesome. Ravi, thanks again.
Thank you so much, Ravi. Appreciate you.
Real quick, I have two things for you. First off, are you an aspiring entrepreneur that wants to find your own freedom? Or are you just unfulfilled or unhappy in your current job and you crave more? Our goal at FYF is to build a community uniting successful entrepreneurs with aspiring entrepreneurs and provide the best resources possible to support you on your entrepreneurial journey. Check out our free entrepreneurship ebook and all of the resources you need to find your own freedom at findyourfreedompod.com. Secondly, one of the best ways for podcasts to grow is to share episodes with your friends and family. It would mean the world to Doug and I if you would listen on your favorite audio platform, watch, and subscribe on YouTube.